night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Warm sunny spells for much of England and Wales today. Cloudier for Scotland and Northern Ireland with showers for some, but for the vast majority it is dry because of a large area of high pressure sitting in the mid-Atlantic, stopping any deep lows or weather fronts from arriving. But a couple of weak features are just about sneaking into the top of the UK. And that's why we've started with cloud and some rain in places for Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England. The rain largely disappears by the afternoon, but 1 or 2 showers are possible for Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, and for the far north of England over the Pennines. To the south of that, plenty of sunshine and feeling very warm, with highs of 24 in Cardiff, 25 in London, 20 in Glasgow and 18 in Belfast under the cloudier skies, so not feeling quite as warm here. But nevertheless, temperatures holding up well overnight because an increasingly humid airflow will arrive from the west and northwest, and although we'll see clear spells in many places, for most of those temperatures will hold up in the double figures, in some spots 13 or 14 Celsius by dawn. Some spots of rain for the far north of Scotland and for the Western Isles with thick and low cloud here, but a brighter day to come for eastern and central Scotland as well as northern England. Plenty of sunshine breaking through during the morning and holding on for the afternoon as well. So really it's Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland where we keep the cloudier skies on Wednesday afternoon with some spots of rain and drizzle. But elsewhere, temperatures up to the mid or even high 20s with that sunshine. 24 in Aberdeen, 28 in London. During Wednesday evening, the clear spells continue, apart from, again, northern and western Scotland, where the thicker cloud will bring some spots of rain and drizzle. And then during Thursday daytime, it's going to be increasingly warm, temperatures peaking at 29 or 30 before cooler weather on Friday.
Post-weather sting. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the issues that we should be looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is Ben Habib, who's a businessman and former Brexit Party member of the European Union. And here's what we've got coming up on the show. It's been travel misery for millions this morning. Journeys across the UK were massively disrupted with the first of 3 rail strikes grinding the network to a halt. We'll hear from commuters, the Prime Minister, as well as the RMT Union and Network Rail. Plus, the UK is praised by a former White House advisor over its support for Ukraine, which he puts down to Brexit. And selling the big issue as he hits the big 4-0. Is this a clue to what sort of king Prince William will become? That's what we're talking about for the next hour. What do you need to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet the programme at GBNews. First, though, it's time for GB News headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Crisis talks were held during a cabinet meeting this morning as the worst rail strikes in more than 3 decades caused major travel chaos across the UK. With 80% of train services cancelled, Boris Johnson warned commuters they must stay the course in the face of what he's calling unnecessary aggravation. More walkouts are planned for Thursday and Saturday, but the knock-on effects will be felt all week. It's after last-minute talks failed to resolve a dispute between unions and rail bosses over pay, jobs and conditions.
We need the union barons to sit down with Network Rail and the train companies and get on with it. And we need, I'm afraid, everybody, and I say this to the country as a whole, we need to get ready to stay the course.
RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says members will overcome whatever obstacles the government puts in their way.
This is a lawful dispute under the legislation that the Tories brought in themselves. And every time we meet the hurdles and break the thresholds that they brought in, they want to change the law again. We've got the most draconian laws in Western Europe and in any democracy, in fact, anti-trade union laws. Whatever they bring in, we'll meet that challenge and we'll continue to campaign. And if necessary, we'll take effective industrial action when we need to.
London Mayor Sadiq Khan says the government needs to take part in the negotiations.
The key thing is for the RMT to sit down with the government, the train companies, Network Rail, and resolve differences around a table rather than strikes. Nobody wants strikes. I don't want strikes. Londoners don't want strikes. And I'm speaking to workers, they don't want strikes either.
Well, people who need to travel today say they've been struggling with alternatives.
It's taken me the best part of 3 hours using 4 buses and a little bit of walking.
I haven't been able to get any trains to work. I've been on buses since about 6:30. They keep cancelling, keep driving past. It's impossible to get on them. They're all so packed. I've only literally just gotten to work now.
I want to use buses, but the queues for the buses are just way too much,
Unions have reacted with fury over a leaked memo which suggests Labour has banned its frontbenchers from picket lines. The head of the TSSA union described it as ridiculous nonsense by a party that was created by trade unions. Labour has declined to comment, although some MPs have joined demonstrations. Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, didn't deny the claim.
I wasn't going to go to one anyway, to be honest, because what I want to see is a negotiated end to this dispute as quickly as possible, because this is obviously causing enormous inconvenience to the public today who need the railways for all sorts of reasons, work and many other reasons, and the sooner this comes to an end, the better.
Well, the Scottish Labour leader, Anas Sarwar, has taken a different approach. He met striking workers on the picket line in Edinburgh and later tweeted of his solidarity with them. To other news now. A man who murdered a couple in their home while their children slept upstairs has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 38 years. Stephen and Jennifer Chappell were both stabbed 6 times in November last year in Norton Fitzwarren near Taunton. Colin Reeves, who served in Afghanistan, launched the attack after a long-running dispute over parking. He killed the couple using a ceremonial dagger, which was given to him when he left the army. A fire in a residential high-rise in West London is thought to have been started by someone charging an electric scooter in their flat. One person was taken to hospital where they were treated for smoke inhalation. 30 residents were evacuated from the building, and those who weren't directly affected were advised to stay in their flats. Incident Commander Liam Hall says the blaze was quickly brought under control.
Approximately 9:20 this morning, the London Fire Brigade were called to a fire on the 12th floor of Stebbing House. Crews from the London Fire Brigade attended within minutes.
Crowds have returned to Stonehenge to mark the summer solstice for the first time in 2 years. The sun rose over the stones at around 10 to 5 this morning and won't set until almost 9:30 this evening, giving more than 16.5 hours of daylight. The summer solstice has been celebrated at Stonehenge for thousands of years, with the stones framing the sun as it rises. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alex and we need to talk about.
Did you choose to stay at home, or are your plans off the rails as travel chaos descends on the country today? Well, for some, it's a great excuse to work from home. The sun is shining, the tennis is on, and that backlog of laundry can finally chug away in the background. For others, it's a painful schlep to get to the hospital or sit an exam, or commute to a job you can't do from the comfort of your couch. Like all things in life, there are winners and there are losers. Yet, doesn't it often feel like the same people always get lucky, while others are always hit with the strife? Well, the Prime Minister held crisis talks at a cabinet meeting this morning in response to the worst rail strikes in over 30 years. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has been looking at the disruption so far.
At one of London's busiest train stations, it was anything but this morning. A largely empty concourse at Waterloo. Indeed, at stations right across the capital, as the vast majority of commuters clearly got the message that 80% of rail services are suspended.
It took me half an hour longer than normal.
Right.
Had to go via Norwood and then back into London Bridge.
I get it, especially after COVID. Like, there needs to be some job increases. There needs to be maybe a bit of a pay rise, but if everyone's working from home, there's no real impact. Like I said, my train wasn't busy. We just got stuck outside.
At Birmingham New Street, passenger numbers there were a fraction of what would normally be seen on a weekday rush hour. This train to Northampton was busy, one of a vastly reduced timetable of services to some key locations. In Scotland and Wales, the disruption is even more severe. This was Linlithgow station this morning. ScotRail say there are currently no services outside the central belt, and only a handful of trains on the normally packed commuter services.
It actually works out a bit better, the times they've put on today, but it's very frustrating, the train strikes.
I was going to go and work in the office. I still could, but I'll be honest, I'm just going to go and work from home instead of working in the office.
At Cabinet, the Prime Minister warned the public they must be prepared for more disruption.
We need to get ready to stay the course, because these reforms, these improvements in the way we run our railways are in the interest of the travelling public.
There were no signs of any Labour politicians at this picket line amid reports the Labour leadership has banned them from turning up. Union bosses warned of further action unless management meet their demands.
This is a lawful dispute under the legislation that the Tories brought in themselves. And every time we meet the hurdles and break the thresholds that they brought in, they want to change the law again. We've got the most draconian laws in Western Europe and in any democracy, in fact, anti-trade union laws. Whatever they bring in, we'll meet that challenge and we'll continue to campaign, and if necessary, we'll take effective industrial action when we need to.
The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury has urged the government to play a more active role in trying to bring about an end to the dispute.
Remember, this may not just be about railways. There's a possibility of disputes in other sectors too. And if ministers simply stand back and say this is the wedge issue of the week, this is the issue upon which we can divide the country this week instead of something else, that is a lack of responsibility. It's a dereliction of duty, and we need better than that from the government.
Although many of those who can will have opted to work from home today, many others took to the roads for their daily commute. The M1 in County Durham, one of the many routes busier than normal. With a tube strike in the capital adding to the misery, London buses are much busier than normal. The frustration obvious among those who can't get on board. Many other commuters, like me, opted for a taxi to work, although cab fares have been increased. With good weather forecast across the week, many others have taken the bike to work. The government says it's actively planning to change employment laws to allow for the likes of agency workers to step in any future disputes. But that won't help with this current set of strikes, which are expected to cause travel chaos across the entire week. Mark White, GB News.
Well, our reporters have been out and about across the UK to see how people are dealing with the disruption to train services. Let's go first to Alice Porter, who is in Reading.
Hi there. Well, I think the empty station behind me says it all. I mean, it's really been like a ghost town all day. And when I've been speaking to commuters, many of them are actually quite sort of jovial about it and sort of saying, oh, you know, I looked ahead and yes, there's fewer trains, but it's been all right. But I think that is going to change throughout the week. I think today there's lots of good weather, isn't there? I think a lot of people, if they can work from home, have taken this as a nice opportunity to be at home. Of course, not everybody can do that. But this isn't just a one-day strike. This is one of 3 days, and that's actually going to have a knock-on effect throughout the week. There's been a revised timetable from yesterday all the way through to Sunday, and so I think I think feeling that you can perhaps be at home and not have to go into work, I think that feeling will start to change. Certainly by Saturday, I think people will be really frustrated they're not able to go about their normal day. I mean, this station is the second biggest interchange outside of London. I mean, normally we'd see about 700 trains coming through here. At the moment, they're operating at about 13 trains an hour, and I think if you mark, those who can't see behind me, but we've got more staff working here than passengers. I mean, I was speaking with some of them earlier, and many sort of saying that they understand the frustration to a degree from some people who are out protesting, but I think many of them feel that this is going to negatively impact, because this is going to be so many passengers who are disrupted, not just here in Reading, but of course this is such a major connection onto London, and then of course if you go onto London today, you're going to be hit by the tube strikes as well.
Well, let's cross now to our Scottish reporter, Davy Donaldson, who's in Linlithgow for us. What's the situation like north of Hadrian's Wall?
Well, it's certainly worse, there's no doubt about that, because we've only got 1 in 10 trains running here and only 5 routes operating across Scotland. Surprise, surprise, they're all in the central belt between Edinburgh and Glasgow and around the Glasgow and Edinburgh area. So, yeah, I mean, things are going not too bad. I mean, there's 2 trains an hour between Glasgow and Edinburgh, so that's certainly helping people. But I think, you know, a lot of people have decided just to say, do you know what, I'm just going to work from home if they can. Obviously, that's not the case for everyone, but certainly that's what a lot of people have decided to do. Earlier on, I got the train to Edinburgh just to see what it was like. I have to say it wasn't particularly busy at all. Very, very quiet indeed. And Edinburgh Waverley Station, eerily quiet. Never seen it like that in all the time I've seen the station during my lifetime, so that was quite something. But yeah, people just trying to go about their business, but obviously when you've only got 2 trains now, it makes it extremely difficult. I was on the picket line as well and spoke to the RMT. They're obviously within the rights to picket and obviously to strike. They say that it's not all just about pay, it's also about, the safety of the railway lines. So that's something that they're highlighting as well, and say that they're happy to get back down to negotiations at any time, day or night, they said to me. While I was there, of course, Anna Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, visited the picket line, probably against Sir Keir Starmer's wishes, so we'll wait and see how that one pans out. But yeah, looking ahead to tonight, last train leaving Edinburgh at 5:30 tonight, so, and I'm not sure that a lot of people would wait till then to try and get that last train. I think a lot of people will be looking to try and get an earlier train, just in case the unthinkable happens and there's another cancellation. Looking ahead to tomorrow, there's going to be some signalling issues, so that's going to have to go back on. A lot of the manual stations have to be physically turned back on, so that's going to cause delays in the morning. And then tomorrow night at Murrayfield, a massive concert there. The Eagles are playing at Murrayfield, so a lot of people are concerned about how they're going to get in, and more importantly, how they're going to get home.
Davy, thank you so much. Well, Will Hollis joins us from Broadmarsh Bus Station in Nottingham.
Yes, well, of course, many people for the last few weeks have known about this. They've been able to make other modes of transport their way of getting to and from work. One of them might be the Broadmarsh bus station here in Nottingham. It's a brand new bus station, but only National Express are running from it right now. Of course, lots of people will have automatically go to those big bus companies like National Express and like some of the other smaller ones as well. National Express, of course, seeing a much higher volume of people looking for their services because of the RMT bus strikes, RMT train strikes. They've said they've seen a significant increase in both enquiries and bookings on days around the specific days of travel as well as the days of travel. They say 85%, a massive amount of their coaches are already booked up, and that while it's working to try and put on extra services, there's just simply no way that it can match the volume that the rail service does provide. So, of course, the advice here for people that might be looking for other modes of transport, particularly coaches and buses, they're saying get your tickets early and plan ahead where you can.
Well, thank you. Well, let's cross to Paul Hawkins, who's at London Bridge Station, where commuters have also faced a tube strike. Paul.
Yeah, look, this morning it felt like the pandemic as we walked through London Bridge Station. It didn't open until 7 o'clock. There wasn't a soul around. Then commuters started to accrue at the doors, and then they opened at 7:30. And some passengers made their way onto the few trains that were leaving the station. It certainly feels like a lot more people, as Davey was alluding to in Scotland, a lot more people are working from home. Anecdotally, it's a little bit busier on the buses, it's a little bit busier on the roads, but certainly we're not seeing huge numbers of people trying to stuff themselves onto buses, trying to take alternative modes of transport, queues in the streets, rows breaking out, the kind of thing that we used to see in strikes before in the capital. And just some data that's come through to us from TfL recently. This is up until 10 o'clock this morning. The tube journeys are 95% down compared to last Tuesday. On bus journeys, they are up 7% compared to last Tuesday. Santander Cycle Hire is up a massive 46% on yesterday. So that would seem to indicate huge drop in tube numbers, but only a little bit of an increase in buses and a big increase on bikes. So some people are taking the bike, but certainly there isn't a huge movement onto the buses. So what we think we're seeing, which is a lot more people from working from home, would seem to be borne out in these statistics from the location firm TomTom. They say that congestion levels at 11 o'clock were higher than at the same time last week in several urban areas, most notably in London, up 13%, and then in Manchester, Liverpool and Cardiff, they were up only 6 to 7%. So it does seem like the working from home phenomenon, if we can call it that, is reducing the impact of the strikes. We've also spoken to Sadiq Khan this morning. We asked him about his position on the tube strike in London. Workers here are striking because TfL wants to cut 600 jobs. It wants to review the pension system. Those are the conditions attached to the bailout from central government to TfL. The mayor, therefore, blaming the attachment of those terms to that bailout on the government. He's saying to the unions, look, it's not my fault. He's saying to passengers, it's not my fault. It's the government have given us this money, and the terms come with that money, and there's nothing I can do about it. Also asked him about Labour's position, which is a bit muddled. Labour leader Keir Starmer telling senior Labour MPs, look, you can't go out on the picket lines. Several of them have been out on the picket lines this morning. Lisa Nandy, West Streeting, backing the strikes, but Keir Starmer saying, look, I just wish there weren't any, but not explicitly condemning or supporting rail workers. Sadiq Khan saying, look, Sir Keir Starmer's been very clear on this, and that Labour just simply don't want to see strikes, and they want everyone to carry on talking.
Paul, thank you very much, and thank you to our entire GB News team around the country. There they are, it's like GB News Celebrity Squares. Well, from a tableau of transport trauma to our studio guest today, who is my good friend and former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. Ben, a lot of people out there taking opportunity to work from home, but there are other people who are really going to be caught up in the mire, people sitting exams who rely on public transport to get to schools, people with hospital appointments, perhaps. I mean, where do you point the finger of blame for this chaos?
Well, the chaos was created originally by lockdowns. We have a cost of living crisis because of lockdowns. During lockdowns, oil reserves, gas reserves were depleted. Government didn't think ahead to replace them. And when we unlocked, prices went through the roof. And the cost of living crisis, I know the government's quite keen to blame the Ukraine war, but the cost of living crisis actually started in November. And what surprises me about this rail strike is it's taken that long to get to it. Actually, we've had 7 months in which the government needed to get ahead of this problem. And the way they could have got ahead of this problem was by reducing the cost of living, by reducing taxes. In fact, as we all know, they broke a manifesto pledge and increased national insurance. What they should have been doing was cutting national insurance, cutting VAT, cutting rates on cutting business rates, getting ahead of the problem, making it more cost effective for people to live. I'm going to give you a stat which really reflects how broken our economy is in the United Kingdom. Over the last 12 years, Alex, GDP per capita in dollar terms has gone down from $39,000 per head to $38,000. We are getting poorer by the day. That's 12 years of Conservative government. And at the same time, costs have gone up. They've gone up dramatically. First of all, we had the asset price bubble created by QE after the financial crisis, and now we've got consumer prices going up. So the working class have been hit twice very, very hard. The root of this problem is really lockdowns and the government not getting ahead of the problem and addressing the burden of cost on the average person.
Ben, thank you very much. You're with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, we're going to hear as well from the RMT, as well as Network Rail on today's industrial action. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Warm sunny spells for much of England and Wales today. Cloudier for Scotland and Northern Ireland with showers for some, but for the vast majority it is dry because of a large area of high pressure sitting in the mid-Atlantic, stopping any deep lows or weather fronts from arriving. But a couple of weak features are just about sneaking into the top of the UK. And that's why we've started with cloud and some rain in places for Scotland, Northern Ireland and the far north of England. The rain largely disappears by the afternoon, but one or two showers are possible for Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, and for the far north of England over the Pennines. To the south of that, plenty of sunshine and feeling very warm, with highs of 24 in Cardiff, 25 in London, 20 in Glasgow and 18 in Belfast under the cloudier skies, so not feeling quite as warm here. But nevertheless, temperatures holding up well overnight because an increasingly humid airflow will arrive from the west and northwest, and although we'll see clear spells in many places, for most of those temperatures will hold up in the double figures, in some spots 13 or 14 Celsius by dawn. Some spots of rain for the far north of Scotland and for the Western Isles with thick and low cloud here, but a brighter day to come for eastern and central Scotland as well as northern England. Plenty of sunshine breaking through during the morning and holding on for the afternoon as well. So really it's Northern Ireland, western and northern Scotland where we keep the cloudier skies on Wednesday afternoon with some spots of rain and drizzle. But elsewhere, temperatures up to the mid or even high 20s with that sunshine. 24 in Aberdeen, 28 in London. During Wednesday evening, the clear spells continue, apart from, again, northern and western Scotland, where the thicker cloud will bring some spots of rain and drizzle. And then during Thursday daytime, it's going to be increasingly warm, temperatures peaking at 29 or 30 before cooler weather on Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, if it weren't for strikes and picket lines, a lot of the workers' rights we have today simply wouldn't exist. And ever since the Luddites smashed up mechanical looms in the early 1800s, modernisation has been a threat to jobs. Industrial action will always go hand in hand with industrialisation. But while the RMT union oppose Network Rail introducing drones to check for cracks on tracks, they're also protesting the risk to workers being made to do just that job. So much of the dispute is a moral tug-of-war that neither side seems to be able to win. But the big problem, as far as I can tell, is the way this country treats the fat cats. Because when it comes to big business, profits are privatised, while risk is nationalised. Oh, when the going is good, shareholders and execs coin it in. But when times are tough, you bail them out while they keep their bonuses and their dividends. Meanwhile, the average difference between what bosses get compared to their workers is a sickening 63 times more. In fact, the UK is one of the worst countries in the developed world when it comes to pay inequality. So as you get frustrated during the so-called summer of discontent, and you hear the argument that everyone's in it together during the cost of living crisis, it's wise to remember that some animals are more equal than others. Let's cross over to St Pancras Station, where our reporter Rosie Wright is at a picket line. Rosie.
A very good afternoon to you, Alex. It's been a real mixed picture here, actually, over the last few hours. A picket line behind me, a little bit sparser than it was first thing this morning. There was another one just down there outside King's Cross Station. It's actually quite calm. There isn't sort of real chaos because lots of people know I can't get a train, so I'm not going to try and get one. And if you wanted to go to Edinburgh today from King's Cross to my left, well, the last train of the day has been and gone. Well, there are lots of tourists coming out of the Eurostar looking a little bit puzzled, sometimes confused as to why they can't get their next connecting train or just hop on the London Underground because, of course, they're on strike too. The London Underground staff there as well, very similar to the RMT strike, saying this is about pay and job insecurity. And one of the really big questions that everyone has is why? Why are there going to be 3 days, today being day number 1, of these significant strikes? Well, earlier, John Leach, Assistant General Secretary to the RMT Union, was right here, and I asked him to explain.
Railways are closed today as a result of RMT strike action because our members are standing up and fighting back against imposed job cuts, an attack on their terms and conditions of employment, and because of the cost of living crisis that we've got at the moment, they need a pay rise. They haven't had a pay rise for 3 years. They've had a pay freeze. We've got £2 billion worth of cuts being imposed upon the industry. This means every single ticket office is threatened with closure. It means that there's a fire and rehire process being brought onto the railway. It means that maintenance and safety regimes are going to be changed, and it means there's pension attacks coming down the chute as well.
Ultimately, they say it comes down to pay and the threat of job cuts. When pushed, John said to me, look, if we got round the negotiating table, I said, what kind of pay would you accept? And they said 7% around there. They want to look at the price index, inflation, real cost of living, and make sure that their staff aren't shortchanged. It isn't about just trained drivers. It's about everyone in all stage of the process. Well, you'll be finding out a little bit more over the course of the next few days if they get what they want, if they can come to some kind of negotiation that would appease them and get these people, tourists, commuters, back moving. Will there be significant damage, though, to the confidence in people in the service and the reliability of these trains? That's left to be untold.
Rosie, thank you very much. Great reporting there. Ben, what are your thoughts about this? I mean, 7% pay rise, when that is actually under what inflation is projected to be, doesn't seem like a big ask. Yes, a lot of people out there would like the same, but there are people saying, well, this will lead to a wage price spiral where people will be paid more, and as a result, the amount things cost will continue to go up. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, this is what some of us predicted 6 months ago, that you'd have these what they call second-round effects, where people react to the cost of goods going up by demanding extra pay. And if we give in to those demands, if those demands are met, then you have more money floating around in the economy, demand goes up, and you get inflation set in because people use the money they've got to buy more goods. And you end up in that spiral out of which it's very difficult to come. That's why the Bank of England keeps saying, keep a lid on wages. But it's not fair, is it? It's not equitable. When you've got prices going up and you've had real wage stagnation or reductions over 12 years, it's not equitable for there not to be wage rises. And the problem I've got with this government is its utter failure to recognise the importance of driving growth in the economy. And you do not drive growth by borrowing, taxing and spending. You drive growth by cutting regulations, cutting taxes and putting money in the back pockets of people so they can make the decisions they want with their money. This is, we're suffering the highest tax burden in 70 years at the moment as an economy. We've got government debt at a record 100% of GDP. The country is in trouble. We're focused on this strike, but there are going to be others. We've got to get ahead of the problem, and we've got to recognise as a country that growth must come first. And so taxes have to be cut. Rishi Sunak may be looking down the telescope of government finances, fearing his ability to, sustain interest rates on the massive amount of debt that he's got with what's happening. But that fear mustn't manifest itself in raising taxes. That's going to kill the goose. He has to have the courage to put money back in people's pockets, allow them to spend it the way they want to, take the pressure off needing increases in wages, take the pressure off the Bank of England, and cushion people through government action, put growth back into the economy.
Ben, thank you. Wise words there. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Do let me know your views, of course, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Next, the UK is praised by a former White House advisor for its support for Ukraine, which he puts down to Brexit. We'll find out why. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:34. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Crisis talks were held during a cabinet meeting this morning as the worst rail strikes in more than 3 decades caused major travel chaos across the UK. With 80% of train services cancelled, Boris Johnson warned commuters they must stay the course in the face of what he's calling unnecessary aggravation. More walkouts are planned for Thursday and Saturday, but the knock-on effects will be felt all week. It's after last-minute talks failed to resolve a dispute between unions and rail bosses over pay, jobs and conditions.
We need the union barons to sit down with Network Rail and the train companies and get on with it. And we need, I'm afraid, everybody, and I say this to the country as a whole, we need to get ready to stay the course.
RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says members will overcome whatever obstacles the government puts in their way.
This is a lawful dispute under the legislation that the Tories brought in themselves. And every time we meet the hurdles and break the thresholds that they brought in, they want to change the law again. We've got the most draconian laws in Western Europe and in any democracy, in fact, anti-trade union laws. Whatever they bring in, we'll meet that challenge and we'll continue to campaign. And if necessary, we'll take effective industrial action when we need to.
In other news, a man who murdered Stephen and Jennifer Chappell in their home while their children slept upstairs has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 38 years. Colin Reeves, who served in Afghanistan, launched the attack in Norton Fitzwarren near Taunton last November. It followed a long-running dispute over parking. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Alex will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's almost a staggering 4 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, wreaking misery across the nation, forcing millions to flee their homes, flattening cities and carrying out atrocities that once made us all wince in horror. Well, today, as war rumbles on, the headlines have changed from torture and terror to economic hardship around the world as sanctions bite and food and fuel prices surge. The human stories are being lost in the static of macroeconomic concerns, with countries at risk of losing their resolve when it comes to responding to Russia. Well, today, former White House security advisor John Bolton has praised the UK for leading the world free from the self-interested and slow reactions of the navel-gazing EU. But how long will be too long if other countries start to buckle? Joining me now is Stefan Weichert, who's in Western Ukraine, has been covering the war since Russia invaded. Stefan, thank you for joining me again today. Give us the latest on what's going on in Ukraine. What is the situation like on the ground? How are the movements in the east? What's Russia's offensive looking like?
Well, if you look at the eastern Ukraine, it's still continuing to be Russia who has the initiative. They are still gaining ground, even though slowly. And what we hear from the Ukrainian soldiers in the region is that they are simply having huge problems with the number of Russian artillery, that sometimes they are outnumbered by 10. But when we look at the southern Ukraine, we are seeing a different picture. We are seeing Ukraine on the counter-offensive and actually having some success around the large city named Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. But it's still minor gains as well.
And we had Boris Johnson returning to Kiev to meet President Zelensky over the weekend. There has been a recent visit by EU leaders too, but still some reticence, I think, particularly on the behalf of Western Europe, to take bolder action, with many countries being under fire for essentially paying Putin more for fuel than they did before the invasion started, with rising costs. Meanwhile, you have this threat to Lithuania for blocking the transit of goods to Russian-held territory. What is the split like in Europe when it comes to the response to Russia? And how do Ukrainians regard their fellow Europeans?
It's obvious that there is a split between, let's say, Italy, Germany, and France, and then, for example, Great Britain and America, and when it comes how to deal with it, and also when it comes to dealing it with, we talk about Eastern Europe in general. But what I can say from people here on the ground is that people are noticing these things. Just today, I talked to a Ukrainian soldier who was wounded earlier in the war, and is just about ready to join back in the front line, and he said, what's going on in Europe? We are really appreciative about what Great Britain is doing, what America is doing, but we don't understand how Germany, Italy, and France specifically, how those three countries are not supporting us more when they see the suffering, the killing of children, and fathers and mothers.
Stefan, thank you ever so much. A little bit windy where you are, so I'm going to leave it there. Lovely to have you back on the programme. Stefan Weishut there, who's a freelance journalist who's been covering the war in Ukraine from the very first day. Ben, Stefan, they're saying that, a lot of Ukrainians are saying, thank the Lord for the US and the UK and a bold response. John Bolton, of course, former security advisor to the White House, saying Britain is really the vanguard when it comes to providing weaponry and support to Ukraine. And yet, there's this big push for Ukraine to join the EU. It doesn't seem to marry up.
I mean, that is odd. I completely agree. And I find it really odd that Olaf Scholz had the courage to turn up in Kiev. They've bought, I think, something like Germany has bought $40 billion worth of oil since the war kicked off. And I think they've contributed about a net total of about $1 billion to Ukraine. So you can see where the money from Germany's been going. And that's the dirty little secret that the EU has. And which I think which is why John Bolton says, outside the EU, the United Kingdom can shine in Ukraine. And we have. We've been all credit to our Prime Minister. He's been like a yo-yo between Kiev and London. And it's terrific to see. But of course, the Anglosphere, the United States and the United Kingdom, has always been out of step with Europe when it comes to foreign policy, hasn't it? We were out of step over Iraq. Some might argue that Europe were right, we were wrong. We were out of step over Afghanistan. We were out of step over Iran. You and I, when we were MEPs, we had lots of run-ins with, with policy in Europe over Iran. They were trying to undermine sanctions against Iran. We're out of step with them over China. Donald Trump was way ahead of the game and calling China out. And Donald Trump, I'm just going to go back to 2018, he addressed the European Parliament and was ridiculed when he said that Germany was becoming over-reliant on Russian oil. I don't know if you remember that. And we had a bunch of German MEPs laughing at him in the front line. But, of course, that's precisely what happened. And that's why the EU is finding it so difficult now to deal with the Ukrainian issue. And without wishing to offend all those who are, who don't see realpolitik quite in the same practical way that I do, it was the EU that was inciting Ukraine, 10 years ago to take their money, to pivot away from Russia, to leave the Russian sphere of influence, if you like. And then in their hour of need, having influenced them in that way, in their hour of need when they were threatened, as they have been now attacked, they've just stood back and they financed the Russian machine. The EU is a deeply flawed, broken project, which is why I am delighted that we are, to some extent, I'm not going to say wholly, because we've still got Northern Ireland in the EU, but I'm delighted that at least our progress is, out.
Yeah, no, the EU have hardly showered themselves in glory on this matter. That is definitely true. But we would say that, wouldn't we, Ben? We are going to go back to the big story of the day, the rail strikes affecting people across the country, because joining me now from Euston Station is Andrew Haynes, who's the Chief Executive of Network Rail. Andrew, it's fantastic to have you on the programme. I mean, there's a lot of discussion today about the reason for these strikes. Some people saying it's about money. Some people saying it's actually about safety. What's your position? How do you make these stop?
Well, look, the first thing I want to say to everyone is I'm really, really sorry if you've been disrupted. This was needless action. It was premature, and it's going to be deeply damaging to individuals, to the workers that will be losing money, and to the broader railway system, which should be focusing on winning people back after the pandemic. Look, at the heart of this are two issues. The first is that, given the rate of inflation, rail workers want a decent pay rise, and that is entirely understandable. But there are two ways to pay for it. We either tax the taxpayer more, or we as a system become more efficient. And I think the first option would be unforgivable, given all else that's going on at the moment. So we've got to become more efficient. We've put forward really credible, reasonable changes to working practices, which would make us a more efficient business, and we could then share some of that in a decent pay rise to our colleagues. And the RMT keep talking to us, but ultimately they then called strike action. They walked away from the talks, and they're having their moment of glory. But it's a real shame.
I'm glad you actually talked about becoming more efficient, because it turns out 10 of the 15 highest paid public servants actually work for Network Rail. You yourself on a pretty good salary of almost 600,000, probably not really as affected by the cost of living crisis as your lowest paid workers. Is there not a just argument here for cutting down the amount that certain execs are paid, 73 of your highest earners on a total of 15 million a year?
Look, we are well paid, but I'm paid less than half of my 2 but 1 predecessors. I'm paid 20% less than my predecessor. I took a voluntary pay cut because of COVID. So we are leading from the front in terms of those reductions. I lead a very, very large, complex organisation. If you were to compare my salary to those of other businesses in the economy, you'd actually find I'm in the very bottom 10%. But that's not the point. I'm well paid, but I've led from the top by actually taking significant reductions. Now, I'm not asking other people to do that. I'm actually saying we can afford a decent pay rise, but we do it by being more efficient and not being a greater burden on the taxpayer. And I believe your viewers will recognise that and they'll identify with that as the way forward.
But the concern here, of course, is some of that efficiency, the automation, will actually see people losing their jobs, which is potentially a lot worse than not getting the pay rise. And I want to go back to that statistic of 10 of the 15 highest paid public sector workers in the UK as a whole are Network Rail. It does seem to me that you might have taken a pay cut and people out there could well applaud you for that. But there doesn't seem to be much fairness when it comes to how wages are being distributed around Network Rail. And I'm sure a lot of people out there can sympathise with workers saying we're struggling to just afford the basics right now.
So look, let me clarify one thing first of all. We are not looking for compulsory redundancies. We've made very clear, and again in our letter to the RMT last night, that we believe we can do all of this through voluntary. So your first premise is incorrect. We're saying voluntary redundancies are the way we can deal with this.
And in terms of workers saying that they're concerned about the safety as well of your operation, where do you think those concerns are coming from?
Look, I think that is I think that's a smokescreen. I really do. The Officer Rail Regulation identified just a couple of weeks back that we are the safest railway in Europe when you look at the whole basket of measures. There is no railway in the continent of Europe that is safer than us. We would not do anything that jeopardised it. We want to make it safer. We want to take people away from the track and allow them to use technology such as drones that they can remotely monitor the infrastructure and not have to be out there. We lost a colleague 18 months ago in Surbiton where he was bowled over by a train because he was doing a job that could have been done remotely. We've lost 3 colleagues in the past 3 years, other than that, who were killed doing work that didn't need doing, but because we haven't changed our working practices, they were in places where their safety was compromised and they lost their lives. That is so wrong. We want a safer railway, not a less safe railway. You don't talk to aviation and say that technology has made it less safe. You say we welcome the technology because it has got a phenomenal safety record, because we harness that modern technology to make us safer. That's what we want to do on Britain's railways. More safe, not less safe.
Andrew Haynes, I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us today. That was really important that you put your point of view across, and we very much appreciate it. Chief Executive there of Network Rail. Well, you know, as everyone exchanged tales of horror about their commute today, I felt a bit left out. My size 6 modes of personal transport attached to the bottoms of my legs are still very much in action. In a cost of living crisis, with transport strikes asunder, a nation getting fatter with mental health issues galore, the art of perambulation is surely a cure-all. I burn 1,000 calories every day and save £1,000 a year while I listen to my favourite music, yak on the phone or bone up with a brainy podcast. And I wouldn't change my commute for the world. It's time for my take on some other stories making the news today. It's the Alex again. Now, Elon Musk, a man whose seat at my fantasy dinner party has been secured for some time now, has mused on Twitter whether TikTok, or indeed social media in general, is destroying civilization. The space-loving tech weirdo who was set to buy Twitter, arguably the sanest of the platforms, and that's saying something, and the richest man on Earth and in the stars, is surely onto something. One need only point at the horrors of the modern world, from brainwashed, self-harming kids to a hypersexualized society, the me of identity politics with its divisive movements and wacky wokery, to see that virtual reality is increasingly destroying actual reality. Perhaps he should dig a little deeper into Tesla's coffers and draw out enough coins to buy the lot of it, then blast it to the outer edges of the universe, where it belongs. I wouldn't miss it for a moment. Now, a new report by the Centre for Brexit Policy says that the UK's ruling elites are preventing the country from fulfilling its Brexit potential and cashing in on the big Brexit benefits that we voted for in 2016. Senior figures in Westminster and Whitehall are stuck in a mindset of decline. I still find myself having to argue the toss on Brexit when, frankly, we did only leave a year and a half ago and were plunged straight into a pandemic that closed the global economy down. And a lot of big-ticket items, from trade deals to free ports, will probably take a long time to come online. But there are chips that could be played right now, like cutting VAT and corporation tax. So why aren't we using our newfound freedoms when we need them the most? Well, we have a Prime Minister who campaigned on getting Brexit done, but hasn't done anything with it since. Maybe it's because he famously picked his own side based on what would be best for Boris. And a Chancellor that I can't seem to remember at a single Leave event during the entire Brexit campaign. It's time for some true believers to take over the Leavers. And what a wonderful thing to learn that a completely anonymous bidder splashed out more than 84 million quid on the Nobel Peace Prize winner of Russian journalist Dmitry Muratov, who was selling his medal to raise money for Ukrainian kids. No need for gushing gratitude nor vain virtue signalling, which many would argue is how charity should be. Just someone evidently with muchos money in a Swiss safe seeing fit to spend it on worthy causes. Sadly, though, there's something about the refracted glory of moral bragging that sees even the most venal celebs dig deep. Putting the word philanthropist in your wiki bio is the new Gucci bag. So if Mr. and Mrs. Money, now in possession of that Nobel medal, had instead come forward, it might have inspired others to do the same, instead of this new craze of spending millions on libel lawyers, only to come out looking like vacuous morons and dreadful human beings. Well, we've been hearing your thoughts today on tube and rail workers going on strike. Fred says, it's a good job I'm not in charge. I'd sack them all and replace each and every one of them with artificial intelligence. Graham also thinks it's time AI took over some rail safety jobs. He says when it comes to safety, AI is by far safer and more accurate, as there is no room for human error. The world is changing and some of these jobs are no longer required. These trade unions are dinosaurs and relics of the past, and time for them to be put to rest and allocated to history. PK says Labour and unions really don't understand how businesses work. They are claiming that the government sits down with the unions to resolve the dispute. The government is not the employer, just a shareholder. When do shareholders get involved in pay negotiations? Never. Jerry says maybe if Westminster led by example and MPs didn't increase their own salaries, they could be taken seriously when they judge others. Ben, haven't got much time to give you the last thought of the day. One quick sentence to sum it all up.
Wow, OK, one quick sentence. Oh, you've absolutely floored me with that question, Alex. One quick sentence.
Brexit not being used.
Brexit not being used. Thank you very much. Brexit not being used. Of course Brexit can't be used because we're stuck in lunar orbit round their regulatory framework. That's why they're not cutting taxes. We have a Prime Minister who believes in big state. We have a Prime Minister who's allied to the EU, whether he likes it or not. They're his friends and partners. We need to jettison ourselves from the EU, get rid of that level playing field, reclaim Northern Ireland, slash regulations, slash tax, and go for growth.
You should be on the Brexit picket line, Ben. You do a good job indeed. Thank you for joining me on today's programme. Ben Habib, who else? That's all I've got time for. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Coming up next, it's The Briefing with Darren. First, though, it's time for the weather forecast. Bye-bye.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's turned into a sunny day across southern parts of the UK with cloudier conditions further north. And aside from a few showers, most places are dry. That's because a very large anticyclone is sitting in the mid-Atlantic. It's blocking any considerable areas of low pressure or weather fronts from coming our way. But a weak front has introduced some cloud to Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, 1 or 2 showers as well. However, even here, the cloud will tend to thin and break overnight, especially for Northern England, southern and eastern Scotland, some clear spells developing. Further south, widely